This week we've got an all-around incredible episode. Our guest is Jana Groda, who is a co-founder and owner of One Love Hemp Dispensary out of Louisville, Kentucky. We talk Kentucky Cannabis, the dispensary, dosages, and more. We're also incredibly delighted to be featuring the local honeys on today's episode. They are Kentucky natives and are an act you don't want to miss. After this episode, please go and check them out, or better yet, catch a live show. I guarantee you any time spent listening to them is time well spent. And before we get on with the show, we now have merch in the podcast store on bluegrasscannabis.com. We have some beautiful embroidered hats with our Bluegrass Banjo logo, shirts printed with our skull design from Brainflower Designs, stickers, and more every day. So if you'd like to support this podcast, think about swinging by the country store on bluegrasscannabis.com and show off your love of Kentucky cannabis and bluegrass cannabis. Thank you again for listening, and thank you for stopping by the Bluegrass Podcast. So to get started, do you want to talk about how you got into cannabis and just how you got introduced?
So, like from the very first time is what we're talking about here?
Yes, ma'am. How did you get introduced to it first? How did you come into contact?
Well, when I was 13, I was living in Texas at that time. One of my dear friends, Lisa, if she listens to this, she'll know who I'm talking about. I was invited to the beach with, I can't remember if it was with her whole family, but I know her brother was there. She had an older brother. And we went down to Galveston Bay, and they had, cannabis, a joint. I'd never consumed. So I was very curious. I would say at 12, I really hadn't heard a lot about cannabis. I knew some people, it wasn't like it is now, is what I'll say. Now it's just cannabis is everywhere. So I did indulge in smoke, and I don't think I could have put my finger on it then. But me looking back at it, I know I was a very anxious child. I don't even know if I could have known that's what was going on with me in my world at that time. I didn't realize I had anxiety until a few years ago. Didn't know that's what it was called. And I just remember that day at the beach, standing down by the waves and just enjoying the waves and where I was and really being in the moment, which as a anxious child, that was difficult. I think I was always my mind was always zooming, making sure I was safe. You know what I mean? Where it's just like not feeling, just almost vibrating at all times. And all of a sudden, it was just very calm. I remember hearing the waves and looking at the waves coming in and just thinking, wow, peaceful. They were off and all kind of laughing and doing their thing, but I just really found a nice, peaceful moment. I don't even know if I've attached it to cannabis, but I was just like, whoa, I haven't felt this before. This is interesting. And then I didn't consume for, I guess, a few years. It was high school, I believe, when I did again. And I found that at that time, the cannabis in my area was coming up from Mexico. It's what we call brickweed. And my friends would consume and all be chill. I would consume and be wanting to go. I can remember one time they were all chilled on the couches and whatnot, and I'm trying to do karate kicks to touch the door frame. And I didn't really dig how it was making me feel. Didn't know why then. I know why now. I think what was coming up was mostly sativas that did not work well in my body. So I kind of put it away. I think I got high a few times in college, a few times in grad school. But I do come from a family of, this is going to be a bit tough because part of my family still lives in a state that's not legal. So I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I'm just going to be straight up with you and you can keep me safe. How's that? So I do come from my family's been in cannabis for a long time. I mean, the first time I saw a cannabis plant, I was 13. We were having a pool party and somebody ripped out one of my family's cannabis plants and threw it into the pool. And I didn't really know. It's like one of those weird things where it was just hush. Nobody talked about it, right? When
They
I
threw it
got
in anger, or they threw it because the party
I
was
don't
that
know
good?
why. I have no idea why. Because why would you do that to this big, beautiful? And I remember distinctly, that was my first time to see a full plant. It wasn't in full bud, but it was taller than I was. It was beautiful. And I have no idea why. Who knows? I was young and didn't really pay attention. I was having fun. What can I say? But when I was in high school, one of my family members did grow and did distribute. And I knew that, but I never really partook after it was just like really bothering me, not working in my body. So I forgot even what you asked me. As I got older, college and things like that, I know that continued and still does today, which I'm very proud of that now, because I really like the term, everybody always says black market, but legacy growers. It really kind of makes me proud because this plant is plant medicine. I've always thought of the plant as medicine. I have always been a natural medicine person, whole plant medicine person. Even when I was young, I used to drive my mother crazy, who's a nurse practitioner, because she, if I wasn't feeling well, she'd offer something. And the quote that, I can remember saying that used to drive her crazy was, "The body is the best healer. I'll be fine." As I got older, I do have a lot of conditions. I have a lot of things going on in my body that began at the age of 13. I was a possible MS patient. I was in one of the first MRI machines in the country in 1988, which was horrifying and terrible. I wish I'd had cannabis before I got into that thing. And as time has progressed, just a lot of things I'll just go through the list. So I am a diagnosed MS patient. I have Hashimoto's, I have Graves' disease, I have Lyme disease, which I'm just now dealing with. Last year I had a medical crisis that kind of brought everything to a head, and cannabis has been one of my lifelines, I will say. It wasn't until 2016 that I was up in Washington. My family's in Washington State and in Texas. So I was in Washington State. My dad lives on this island. He lives in Anacortes, which is on Fidalgo Island. And I was just on the couch reading Bon Appetit, which is a magazine. And there was this article on terpenes. And I was like, what? Terpenes in food? What? And I just began this big, deep dive. It may have been 2015, because 2016 is when I went to Colorado to go to the Trichome Institute to learn about terpenes and become certified as an interpener, which is like a sommelier of cannabis. Mm-hmm. But I went thinking I was going to do this whole food thing, because I'm also a certified culinary nutritionist, and do wine pairings with cannabis. Just seems so exciting to me. So I was flying back, and I went to Trichome Institute, influenced by this article, and began to learn about terpenes, and came back to Kentucky and was like, Nancy, who was my neighbor, I was just like, oh my gosh, we've got to get terpenes, and I'm kind of ahead of myself because there is when Nancy and I met and such, but that is when I learned why the medicine was not working in my body when I was a teenager, if that makes sense. When I began to learn about linalool, and I was like, I don't think anything that I've had then had linalool in it. I think it was all straight up sativa. My body doesn't do well with the sativas. I really have to look at the chemical profile of the terpenes to know whether it's going to work for me or not. And now that science is here, it has made it so much easier. So I've found many things that work in my body, cannabis wise. And I would say I'm a daily consumer. I've kind of figured it out. I found my sweet spots for sure.
And do you have any sort of preferred method that you like better than others, or just day to day depends on how you're feeling, or?
Depends on how I'm feeling. I mean, I like all the methods. I think topically it's almost magical how quickly it works.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also a great thing for people, with pain management and such, because you can use topicals and still function and work. It's not going to get you intoxicated or high. I definitely use edibles because they last longer. And so in 2015, I actually had a rock climbing accident where I pulverized my calcaneus, I had a compression fracture in my back and a head injury. So I pretty much have day-to-day pain. And so edibles work well because they are longer lasting. Smoking, consuming by inhalation, for me, especially last year when I went into what's called thyroid storm and just had months and months of nausea that was horrid. Smoking seems to work the best for that. So I don't necessarily, I think that I need that day to day, but when it comes down to nausea, to me, that is the best form so that you can eat and function. Because, when you're nauseated, it's hard to really do anything. That stomach really has a hold on us for sure. So I'd say all of the above. And that's one thing that's great about this medicine is it has so many different forms of consumption that usually one way is going to work for everybody. But I also find that when you do use the different methods of delivery, it almost amplifies each other. So you get almost like a total package type of relief,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
Also, yeah, also the cannabis is what's called it works in different ways in small amounts than it does in large amounts. So small amounts are more activating, whereas large amounts are more sedating, so you can find your sweet spot in there somewhere to be able to consume and still function. Because, I own a business, I'm a single mom, I've got 5 kids, a beautiful big old dog who's sitting right here at my feet. And I have to be able to function. So I have found that sweet spot where I can consume just enough to take the edge off of pain and be able to function and get through everything I need to get through. And then for sleep, if I need to use it for sleep, consume more and then, which is more sedating. So that's the way I use it. All different ways.
Minimum effective dose, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like the whole, like the microdosing thing, which microdosing can be anywhere from, half a milligram to 10 for some people. Beginners, when people come into my shop, I do not like to, if they have never consumed, I do 1 to 2 milligrams because you never know how it's going to function in somebody's body. And that microdosing,
go slow.
Amen. That 2 milligram dose, which seems like nothing for most people, is really surprising how it just takes the edge off and makes life so much better. Mentally, physically, it blows my mind how little can do more. Us Americans always think that more is better. So I do have people that come in and I'll tell them, consume, start here, start low, go slow, slowly titrate up. Next time I see them, they'll come in and be like, Jana, I didn't listen to you. I took the full 10 milligrams and you were right. I shouldn't have done that. And it's like, well, in the future, you might be able to. But when you're first starting, it's like, that's just 10 milligrams is a lot for most people.
And
And
I
then,
don't think
if you,
they realize there's a ceiling too, right?
right, right. There is a narrow therapeutic window. Actually, studies show that 30 milligrams and like up to 30 milligrams is where you get therapeutic value. After that, studies show there is no value. Now, I know people who consume more that are getting value from that, but for the most part, that lower dose is where most people are going to fall into. And I'm not talking about terminal patients. I'm not talking about cancer patients. I'm just talking about like your day-to-day person. That's where they're going to fall.
Yeah, your average Joe.
Yes. Or Jane.
Exactly. And we sort of moved really fast, but did
I
you want to talk
know.
about how you met Nancy at all?
Miss Nancy. Yes. Nancy was my next door neighbor. In 2010, I moved into this little farmhouse next door to her. With my family out there, and we were both homeschoolers, which was a great connection. We just became friends. Our kids played together, um, and we just kind of got to know each other. We both had the same mindset of food is medicine, natural plant medicine, and so we just connected. And when this hemp thing hit in Kentucky, we literally we were on the cul-de-sac, and I remember us meeting in the cul-de-sac and talking, and it was like we just made this decision, two moms in a cul-de-sac, that this hemp thing was here and we were going to do it. That is how we began. Nancy at that time still owned New Earth, and she brought me in, and we had one cabinet that was CBD, and so I kind of became a consultant for the CBD, working mostly with that, but also with the hydro and all the nutrients and things like that for the organic gardening. And I had just in 2015 divorced, and I was kind of in this place of what the heck am I going to do, because I was a at-home mom. I gardened, organic gardened. I literally grew almost everything that my family ate. I prepared all food, and I homeschooled. And suddenly it was like, I got to figure something out to do. So by the grace of Nancy, she came over and just started asking me to do some projects with her. And we just kind of grew that way. They opened up a little express, New Earth, on Bardstown Road in 2015. And then it was August of 2018 that she and I decided, let's do this dispensary thing. She sold her New Earth, her portion, to her brother. We partnered on One Love. We literally closed the doors one day as New Earth, put up a temporary sign on the window that said coming soon, One Love Hemp Dispensary, and opened the doors the next day with that same one cabinet of CBD. And we had nothing else in the store. I mean, it echoed in there. It was just so empty. And lo and behold, you could hear screeching of tires, like brakes, people slamming on their brakes to stop to come in, because they saw that word dispensary. And we're so excited, which, I mean, tells you a lot. Kentucky is so ready for cannabis, believe it or not. And that's just kind of how we began. And we just slowly grew from there. Of course, COVID hit in 2020, and that was pretty intense for any small business owner, but we just chugged along. And we now currently have 3 locations in the Louisville area. And we've got one in Bowling Green opening. The soft opening will be August 1st, and that is a franchise. And we couldn't be happier. I cannot believe that we've grown like we have, but at the same time, Nancy is such a gem. Like I told you the other day, I feel like she is the best kept secret in the cannabis industry. She's been in it for so long. She also just, natural medicine, plant medicine, I don't know. It's just we carry a lot of knowledge in our dispensary. I know on our cards and stuff, I think it says like 80 years of cannabis expertise, but between us and all of our employees who are all cannabis knowledgeable and consumers, I don't even know, decades and decades, maybe a couple of centuries of knowledge if you added up everybody's expertise for sure. We did bring terpenes to Kentucky, I will say. Nobody really knew what they were. I know when I started going to Colorado to get a little knowledge on it, and I came back and I'm like, Nancy, we've got to do this. I think she thought I'd lost my mind, you know? So we started putting terpenes into things and seeing much bigger results for our customers and patients. And I do believe that's what has helped us explode like we have, being able to fine tune cannabis consumption to get the best results that you can for whatever condition or whatever it is you're seeking from that plant. Does that make sense?
Buckskin pony from the stall. The mom lay beside the fence under a tarp out in the rain. Peeking from the plastic was her honeycomb name. Sat down on the water trough, wrung my hands and cried. Suppose we're all just animals with slightly different hides. I never got used to watching horses die. They die badly. It has kept me up at night. I never got used to watching horses die. Count my pretty ponies when I breathe the morning light. Running on a cooling summer day, feeling fine and frisky till a whole got a boss mare toward her shoulder. Her stance was at a tilt. Now she's softly sleeping under the green alfalfa quilt. Grady Pruitt took his bobcat and buried her for me. The dead wagon must turn around. How happy I should be. I never got used to watching horses die. They die badly. It has kept me up at night. I never got used to watching horses die. Count my pretty ponies when I breathe the morning light. Excess herds are growing by the day. The once prized domestic pet ain't worth the price of hay. They've been turned out on the strip mines, get to starving into the snow. They'll wander off the mountaintop to lick salt off of the road. This little girl inside me is chomping at the bit. She cannot save them all, the truth hard to admit. I never got used to watching horses die. They die badly. It has kept me up at night. I never got used to watching horses die. Count my pretty ponies when I breathe the morning light. I never got used to watching horses die. Count my pretty ponies when I breathe.
Absolutely. And in
So,
terms of getting started in like 2020, like you're talking about with COVID, do you feel like
mhm.
internet sales helped you all at all, being able to have that avenue for products
The
and things
internet.
that wasn't in store?
Yeah, and we were able to stay open. We were considered essential. We put up all the stuff, all the acrylic, just like everybody did. What a crazy time. What a lot of money that people had to pour into their business to keep everybody safe. Um, and internet sales definitely were phenomenal for us during that time. And we could do pickup. So a lot of people were doing pickup where they could call the order in and drive down to Bardstown Road and pick it up. And then we did open up a little express stop in our headquarters shop in J-Town, because that was a little easier for people too. So that allowed us to kind of continue, and people could order online. We also delivered during COVID um, to make it a little easier and, more, I don't know what word I want to use, just keep us going, you know?
And
So
since
it's,
you'll be opening up, hopefully, I'm guessing with a license in 25, how do you feel about this next year and a half, this like build up period?
um, yeah, that will be interesting because, we don't really know what all that looks like yet, how they're going to license or anything like that. So my mindset on it is just keeping our head down and doing what we do best. Um, I do think, we've built a reputation of trust and knowledge. And, going into medical cannabis, it's hard to say, Elijah. It's hard to say what that's going to look like. It's a medical bill. I don't really know how lucrative that's going to be for people. Um, I don't know. It's a little scary,
Oh, for
especially
sure.
for states that have gone legal. There's usually a lot of income that the state receives that makes it really beneficial for both the state and the consumer, right? Medical doesn't really do that because it's not taxed, as far as I know, from what I'm reading. So that means that how many licenses for dispensaries are they going to get out? I don't know. I really don't know. When Arkansas went medical, the first year they were open, they only had 5 dispensaries in the entire state, which is crazy to think. So if you lived in the middle of nowhere, being able to get, if you had a medical card, being able to get what you needed, you'd have to drive pretty far. I really hope that Kentucky doesn't do that. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Oh, yeah, we had that problem in Illinois when I worked at a dispensary there where basically we were the last chance saloon on the border. And if you wanted
Yeah,
something else, you really needed to drive a couple hours to Chicago. But I'm
right.
interested to see with Missouri and Michigan being so open, I already have had friends who've moved over there and opened
Yes.
licenses just early. So, I mean, like, the competition is on and we're definitely losing traffic.
Amen to that. Um, it really, I don't know. I guess because day to day, I deal with a lot of people who have a lot of conditions like I do. And I know when you tick through a list of all of these things are going on with you, it seems like, oh my gosh, there's so many things going on. It can't be that way. Well, when you've got an immune system that's really messed up, all sorts of things can happen. And you see people coming in with so many things going on. And they're kind of at the end of their rope. Medical doctors are only given so much time to be with their patient. Pharmaceuticals are kind of a one fits all, there's not really, it's not like plant medicine where you really have to find your sweet spot. It's not just about one plant. There's a lot of things you need to do to feel better lifestyle wise. But when they
Mhm.
come to us, a lot of people are at the end of their rope. They don't know where else to go. And it's such a bummer. I feel like it's 2023. We're not going to have medical until 25. And it's almost cruel when I'm looking into the eyes of some of these people who are really at the end of the rope. I don't understand. And I know people will be like, well, it's finance, it's money, and I know all that. But at the same time, I don't know. To me, it's about humans, and let's not be cruel. Let's get these people what they need. It almost takes somebody in your family to get really ill, somebody that you love so much. When they get ill, that's when I see people who've never consumed cannabis. They're just looking for something to give relief. And I think how much better it would be if we were just an open state, an adult use state. It would make it a lot easier.
100%.
That's why 2025, I really hope it's a lot brighter than what I fear.
100%. I mean, it's like we were talking about, you have to see, right? Is there a state that's done it in air quotes right so far?
Correct. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I'm
I
curious
know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say, kind of, you mentioned lifestyle. I'm curious what you think about up in Maine and some of the different states that have talked about trying to regulate it as a food rather than as a pharmaceutical. If you had any thoughts about that.
I have big thoughts about that. That's such a great question. I do think of cannabis as food. I treat it as any other ingredient that I do in my kitchen, obviously with respect. When you learn about the endocannabinoid system and that our bodies need it, that's where I'm like, it has to be food. I do education and I teach a lot about the endocannabinoid system. I actually think it's criminal that we're in 2023 and that it's not taught even in when you're young and you take your first biology class and you're learning about the respiratory system and the reproductive system and this system, the that system. Well, there's the endocannabinoid system. It's not some woo-woo thing that people, have just created. It is a legit system. I just finished the cannabis nurse certification course. And in the things that I was reading and studying and all this, all the research, they are now connecting every condition to an upregulated or downregulated endocannabinoid system. And most people don't even know what an endocannabinoid system is, So I really feel like, we've been fighting to legalize the plant, but if we made it where it was required to be taught along with the other systems, taught in medical school, because a lot of doctors don't even know about it, which doesn't make any sense to me. The next step really is to get that into our school systems, medical books, because if people learned about that, they would have no fear of cannabis. It would be, they'd realize that they needed it. We need cannabis just like we need, or I'm sorry, I should say it this way. We need cannabinoids just like we need protein. If they prohibited our protein like they did cannabis for 80 something years, we would not stand for that. So it is just as essential as protein. It's what keeps us in balance. It's what keeps us in a state of homeostasis, and it's what regulates our entire body, all of the systems. When I teach, I always say it's like the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, the one ring that rules them all. It is the Obi-Wan of the body. And that's where I think we really need to, we've been so focused on legalizing the usage and the stigma is still there. But when I teach people about that, I actually was invited to a church here in Louisville last week, and that's all I taught. I don't teach about, if you've got this condition, take this. If you got this condition, take this. I don't teach that way. When I taught these people and told them about the endocannabinoid system and gave them some sites to go to and places to go to learn about it, they were all blown away, and almost some of them a little mad. Like, why haven't we learned about this? And I'm like, I know. It doesn't make any sense. Pardon?
You feel cheated when you find out about
this.
You're like, no one was talking about this?
Yes, no, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And that system was found, the ECS was discovered in the 90s. It's not new because that THC molecule was discovered in 63. And Raphael Mechoulam, who discovered that, he and his team, don't want to discount the team. It was in the 90s when he, again, found, the receptors and the endocannabinoid system. And then there, science began with the ECS there. And we still, it's 30 years later and it's not in books for my children to learn at school. Doesn't make any sense, but I guess that's really where the next fight is. And there are some people that believe strongly about this and are working to get it into medical books and things like that. But I wish as a whole, the industry and the advocates would focus on that. I really feel like that would be a huge turn in just the thought on cannabis. But it is, when you think of like turning, it's not a little speedboat that we're turning. It is a gigantic cruise ship and it takes a minute to turn. You can't just turn like a cattle horse. It takes a while to get that ship turned around. It's definitely hadn't been a speedboat. It's been 80 something years since this all began. So I guess we just one-on-one. I feel like it's kind of an inside job, just being able to, meet with small groups and teach them until, I don't know, the system wakes up. The system, the big capital S system.
No, I think you're right. And like you're talking about, it's about lifestyle and education. Not letting it get to this point to where someone's a terminal patient before you use it as a
Right.
pharmaceutical. You can keep the system in balance. You can make it like food, a regular part of your routine, nutrition, the food medicine movement.
Oh,
No, I agree with
absolutely.
everything you're saying. And like you're talking about with education, it's just a long, hard slog, right? Just
Oh,
the
it
way that we
is.
educate about drugs in general.
Yes. There's things too that, like I said, it's not just one plant. There are things that you can consume and do to help prime that endocannabinoid system that we're not taught either. Things like taking a probiotic daily, taking an omega-3. These things actually help the endocannabinoid system. And I would just consider that lifestyle, doing exercise. They say the studies that I see, like just singing or dancing can elevate your endocannabinoid system. So can laughing, which, it's funny because, when you laugh or dance or sing, we tend to feel better. That's the endocannabinoid system elevating and letting off some of those endogenous cannabinoids. Which I was telling Nancy the other day, I said, it's one of those things that you hear growing up or just, hear tossed around where laughter is the best medicine. And it was the other day I went, oh my gosh, laughter truly is medicine because it's helping our endocannabinoid system rev, I guess would be the word that I would, that makes me think of. And that's simple. Everybody can do that just, when you're alone or when you're watching a movie or whatnot. But these things were just not taught. I do tell people when you take your CBD, dance because it actually helps that CBD work better. And I feel like that's kind of free CBD if you're laughing, singing, having fun. But yeah, once again, that's that endocannabinoid system that nobody knows about.
The visible sign of the invisible light.
Yes. Seriously.
And you all do some work with some mushroom supplements too, right?
Yes, we do. So the functional mushroom line that we have is Myco Girl. We developed that. I believe Nancy talked a little bit about that because there were things that we were consuming daily, individually. If you saw my regimen that I do, it's like crazy. And then we just was like, wait, we're taking all of these things. Why don't we just put it in a gummy? That seems easy. And so that's how that all began. So Myco Girl, we right now have 4 different gummies in that line. And I do believe those are functional mushrooms, which is food, right? I am a strong believer that food is medicine, and that's not new. You see that everywhere. Most conditions, I would say 90 to 95% of conditions can be taken care of by a change in diet. And when I say diet, I don't mean calorie counting at all, because that's not fun. I just mean making sure you eat a quarter cup of wild blueberries every day for brain health. Well, most people love blueberries. That's not a problem. And you could do more than that, but I think a quarter cup is a great idea. But, things like that, Brussels sprouts, certain things that just make everything better in your body. Mushrooms are a part of that package. But most people aren't going to go and buy lion's mane and chop it up and saute it and eat it. So putting it in a gummy, making it easy for people to consume is what we've done. And you get great results from lion's mane. Mm-hmm.
Like you were talking about education, just getting people familiar with it, right? Mushrooms are
Yeah.
still, I think, to a lot of people, that corner case, like, no, I won't have any of those.
Right. Or most people, when they hear mushroom, they'll come in and they're like, mushrooms. They think we're talking about psilocybin, which is the trippy dippy mushroom. I don't have a problem with that mushroom at all. A lot of beautiful, amazing research going on across the country, especially Johns Hopkins with that. Microdosing has become a thing in our country because it's neuroregenerative and helps so much with Alzheimer patients, TBI patients,
This rate, it might
PTSD
be cannabis.
patients. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could almost see that being legalized before cannabis federally, just because of it doesn't have the stigma. And so research has been able to be done, unlike cannabis was for so long,
Oh,
because they can
absolutely.
get funding for it. Yeah, I know a lot of people don't even realize that because it's federally illegal. It's hard to get funding for something that's, because federal monies feed those research that's being done, and it's hard to research something if people aren't giving you the money for it.
Oh, yeah. Well, and mushrooms have just, it blows my mind the way that cannabis research has not been allowed to go forward, but things like MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, some of the
Right.
heavier, psychedelics, the research has just been so much easier to get.
And I wonder, I'm just thinking this off the top of my head. We went down to Canadelic in February, and that was mind blowing. Oh my gosh, it was mind blowing. Learned so much. The energy there was so amazing and so beautiful and so supportive. I guess is the best way I can put it. In cannabis industry, I felt a lot of, just a lot of, I don't want to say strife, competition. I guess competition is the better word. Even within the advocacy groups, there's been a lot of, I don't know, I just feel like I wish everybody would just band together. That could almost, could do beautiful things. It's a tough thing. We are human, but I don't know if the psychedelic world is dealing with that as much. And maybe that's why part of it, why it's moving and progressing like it is. I don't know. But cannabis advocacy I would just wish everybody would band together. I think we could see a lot of movement if that were the case. And even within the industry, there's so much competition. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think, you're definitely right. There's a lot of competition. I feel like so much of it has been created, though, just because of how legalization has come in. The weird piecemeal, the inability to access the capital S system, right?
Yep.
So many people are left on the outside. It's like, well, if there's no way to get into the system still, are you kind of encouraging a black market? I'm interested with psychedelics if, they just go through a prescription route. you know,
Yeah, that will be
will you
very
have created
interesting.
this other
Hmm.
black market like in cannabis where, or traditional market, however you want to say it, just
Right.
there's the licensed market and then there's what the other 60 to 70% of consumers are using.
Right. That the gray market or that black market area, or the legacy market is the term that I've really come to embrace.
Your local market.
Yes, your local market. I like that. Um, and it's hard to say because I know with cannabis too, there's a lot of money in cannabis. There's a lot of money in pharmaceuticals. We do know that there's a patent on cannabis, so we know that it works, right? The government has a patent. There are some
Hmm.
synthetic forms of this because we do have phytocannabinoids where they come from plants. We have endocannabinoids where they're made inside our body. Then we have synthetics, and that would be like your Marinol, and there's a few others on the market. Spice is a synthetic cannabinoid.
Hmm.
There's some out on the market now too. Um, and I know that synthetic, the pharmaceutical market is making these things. But what I do know is they do not work as well and can even cause overdoses like spice. We saw a lot of overdoses because it actually fits in the receptor. One of the theories of why you cannot overdose on cannabis is because those molecules don't actually fit perfectly into the receptor, but the synthetic cannabinoids do. And so there's no stopping it. You know what I mean? It's like you can get a big whopping overload of it. And I hope
Hmm.
these pharmaceuticals that are developed don't do that. Also, although if it's a drug on the market, a lot of people don't realize there's something that for it to be approved as a pharmaceutical drug, it has to have something called an LD50, which is a lethal dose. So for a drug to be picked up, that you're taking from the pharmacy, it has to have a lethal dose, meaning it can kill you.
Hmm.
Marijuana, cannabis, weed is not like that, which is beautiful. So all of these pharmaceutical drugs that are being developed or that will be developed are dangerous, can be dangerous, I guess is the way I should say it, if they're not used correctly, and you don't get the same results as if you're using medical cannabis.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've heard about these, but the test trials that they did with like endocannabinoid system blockers,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think
They
that
did
that's a
that.
really good example of how necessary this is, like, and how dangerous
Right.
the pharmaceutical side can be.
Right. So they did develop, there was a pharmaceutical drug that was developed it was for dieting. Do you know this? And it blocked the receptor because your endocannabinoid system has triggers whether you're hungry or not.
Mm.
And so they developed this drug to block one of the receptors so that people wouldn't be hungry. What they also found, and this is one of the studies you're talking about, was that they had a few suicides occur because it created depression, because it was knocking the endocannabinoid system out of balance
Yes.
and depressed people. And then they had these suicides begin to occur. So the drug was removed from the market. And so people get upset when it's like, yeah, but when I consume cannabis, I get hungry. A lot of times I feel like that's probably a sign that you're not getting the nutrition that you need. So it just means you need to eat some healthy food. People call it the munchies, and they tend to just grab what's in front of them. But it's not a bad thing. They should be eating just nutritious stuff. But yeah, those pharmaceuticals are not the way to go for sure. I don't know. It's scary. It's
Instead of,
scary.
like you said, a lifestyle. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good example of if you do go cold turkey and just remove this already naturally occurring system, things go really bad. Yeah, that's
Oh
exactly.
yeah.
I never want to come out and talk about those studies, but like, yeah, people were throwing themselves off of roofs. Like, I think that's a
Yeah.
pretty clear indicator that something went horribly wrong.
Right. Right. I
And
mean,
I
what
think
should
that,
we go ahead? I'm sorry.
oh, and to your point about it already works really, really well, I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that there's this desire to formulate things sometimes when it's like, nope, it actually works pretty well on its own. You don't need to mess with it as much.
Right, right. And you know, it's interesting how we have so many products in cannabis in the, you know, in dispensaries and our dispensaries, so many ways to take it, to consume it. There's gummies, there's topicals. People, you know, come in, they're like, oh my gosh, they put this stuff in everything. And it's like, well, yeah, because, you know,
It's really
everybody's looking
useful.
for, yeah, very useful or whatnot. But a lot of that, you know, all of these products were driven by prohibition, because the plant, I'm going to go back to terpenes because that's kind of my, I'm not neurotypical, and I would say my obsession is terpenes. So anytime I can get back to terpenes, I'm going to do it. But when you've got the plant, you smell cannabis before you see it, right? I mean, it is loud. That's all the terpenes. So when it became illegal, moving that across the country becomes very difficult because you can smell it. You know, dogs are trained to smell it. So that began extraction process, right? That became concentrations. That is where vapes come from, dabs come from. Extract and put in anything you can so that it doesn't look like cannabis. And also what drove the THC up in plants, people began genetically, you know, raising those levels so that less is more. Because if you're going to buy it, you're taking a risk. And so you want to get the most strong cannabis you can find so that it will last longer. And so now we have all these products. To me, the flower is king, actually queen, because we're talking about female plants. If you can consume that way, that is the best way to consume it, because that is the whole plant matrix, right? It'd be like a carrot. The best way to consume a carrot is to eat the whole carrot rather than pulling out the beta carotene, because once you pull something out and isolate, it's not a carrot anymore, right? So
Your
hopefully,
vitamin C tablet versus an orange.
right, you know, because it works symbiotic. Everything in it is working together to get the results, and there's less chance of overdose, you know, or consuming too much, because the way the plant grows is the way I feel like it should be consumed. Sometimes you do, I mean, you know, like RSO, I feel like it's kind of a different type of thing. You're dealing with intense conditions that need a very high amount, right? But hopefully at some point federally, we will be legal and everybody can just consume their flower, grow it in their backyard along with their tomatoes and carrots and everything. I don't know if I'll ever see that in my lifetime, but it's a dream. And I do feel like it's the safest thing. Black market does not always create a safe market, right? I remember being at the Capitol, not this session, but the 2022 session. And we were going around and meeting some of the senators and reps and whatnot, and went into one's office and they're for pro cannabis. And then they said, talking about dabs and concentrates, they weren't for that because they had a binder full of young men who had died from dabbing. And I was like, whoa, wait a moment. What were in the dabs? Well, cannabis. And I said, where are we? Kentucky. Okay, well, it's a black market here. So what was it? You don't know what was in those concentrates. You have no idea what the young men were consuming. So we can't even say that cannabis caused these deaths. So the best thing to do is to make a legal market. Then you know what people are consuming for the most part, right? You know, and you know, they were
The
like,
intent and the hope.
oh, didn't think about that. It's like, yeah, I mean, if people are at home making these dabs on their kitchen stove, there's chemicals that they have to use. And if it's not, you know, evaporated off or removed, then they're actually dabbing these solvents and stuff. It's not the cannabis. So let's make a legal market. But it's
And I think
amazing how many people don't think about that, where it's like, you can't say that cannabis is doing these things. That's old. That's old school thinking. That's
oh,
not the way it
100%.
is,
Well, and like you're
So,
talking about solvent versus solventless extracts, right?
yes,
Even
right,
just we don't even need to use these chemicals. It's not necessary in the
right.
process.
hmm hmm Like hash is a concentrate.
Oh yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of ways they try to use these things against us when we're advocating, and it's just like, that just doesn't roll. But to the public, it does, and that's the scary, sad thing, is that they'll take these things that they're being told by people who don't even understand what they're talking about, because they're trying to create that fear. And
hmm
I don't know. At this point in history, I'm like, I don't even understand why. I don't understand. I'm 54 years old, and I'm just waking up and going, I don't understand. I don't understand us, us humans. Why do we do this to each other? Who
Oh,
knows?
well, I think that'll be part of the legal cannabis industry, right? Like in every industry, I think in our country, like there's definitely not going to be a perfect system that's going to protect all consumers just because
Right,
we regulated it, right? There's
right,
always going to be that push back and forth of, maybe they're a regulated company, but it's like some of the companies we had in Illinois that would just send us moldy SKUs of product that passed
right,
a lab test at the time, but obviously no one was quality controlling anything going out. There's
right.
just no guarantee either way, right? You really have to
hmm
educate consumers so that they can know what they're buying.
Amen to that. Even on the black market, I try to educate my people on how to smell, to see what they're actually smoking. You know what I mean?
hmm
Um, because you can learn a lot from your nose. You
Oh
know.
yeah, the
Mhm.
smell of mold is pretty you if you stick
Oh
your nose
yeah,
in the jar and you don't want to consume it or you have a question mark, just chuck it.
yeah,
If it's good, you're
absolutely,
probably not going to have that reaction.
absolutely. Salt Lock has a smell where they didn't, where it still has the nutrients, where they didn't wash it out before they pulled it. Mold has a smell. There are some growers who were, and I don't know if they still are, would use things like grape soda or something to give that sweet, or even like purpley, and there's a smell to that. I mean, there's just certain smells that it's like, I'm with you. If your nose is not into it, do not consume it. That also comes with terpenes. Like if I had known that when I was young, if I had smelled that flower and did not dig the smell of the terpene profile, it means my body probably did not want that. And that's actually
Absolutely.
how I do in the dispensary when I'm trying to figure out what terpene profile would work best for people, is I have them smell it. And what they're attracted to is what most of the time will work in their body. Because the nose knows what the body needs.
Exactly. Well, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just that first indicator, right? And it's way better
Mm-hmm.
than bag appeal.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Yep. Indeed, indeed.
So, not to keep you on here forever, but were there any, you talked about your new franchise in Bowling Green, you talked
Uh-huh.
about your mushroom project. Was there any other projects that you wanted to get the word out about before I let you go?
Um, I mean, that the Bowling Green project is, the big one right now. That's why I'm leaving here to go meet with Nancy so we can talk through just a lot of that, because we're still working on that. That I would say that's my focus right now, because if once we get this set up, hopefully there will be, we'll move into the next one. Really, this year and a half, I just want to keep my nose to the ground and keep going as we're going. We built ourselves. I mean, basically, we opened our doors knowing that we wanted to work in the community. And, two moms we each have 5 kids. We're very safe people. We just really wanted to teach people about cannabis and its usage, and that it is safe, right? I just want to continue that. That's my ongoing project, I guess I would say. And I don't ever want to lose sight of that project. Because ultimately, no matter what we're building, no matter what we're doing, if that isn't the focus and the priority, we're not going to do well. I like people to know that whatever they've got going on, we absolutely can help them. With the plant, we also carry a lot of love in our dispensary. I mean, we're called One Love. But I do believe a lot of people just need an ear and a little love because, when you're at the end of your rope, you do feel like nobody's listening to you. So I would just say that's my ongoing project. And the most important for people to learn, understand, and know that this plant is nothing to be scared of.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And
Absolutely. I know
looking
I was
forward to
all
seeing
over
new
the
One
place.
Loves.
Yeah, I was all over the place, but there's just so much. I mean, you could have me on here every day and I would have so much to say. But I think
Oh, yeah.
anybody that has benefited from the plant, I don't know, wants something that really works for you. Cannabis is a lifestyle. I mean, it is a family value, as we say. I do believe in consuming. I've become a better human. I've become a better mother, a better partner. And my hope is that people learn that once they start consuming. It's just like, oh, wow, I laugh more than I ever have in my life. And it's not because I'm stoned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that can happen, obviously. But I don't know. I
do that. It's just because they're stoned. No,
yes!
It's not. I know what that
yeah,
is.
It's like, no, it's like when that endocannabinoid system balances out, it's just like this let go of all this stress and anxiety. And fun is important. I mean, it's on our sign at our dispensary. Without fun, there is no health. And I do believe that's something that once you can figure out, like where you find your Goldilocks place with cannabis, where everything's just right, everything comes a little easier, so all over the place, but just a love for the plant and a love for people, love for my customers, my patients, and all the advocates out there. So I appreciate Kentucky and everything that every single advocate has done in the state. I mean, when that bill passed, I wanted to hug and gather all of them and just like, way to go, because there's a lot of them that have worked so hard for so long. It's still not over, but boy, we took a step forward.
Pistol.
This is just literally, that is such a great way to put it. The starting pistol. It's begun, So, but thank you for having me on. We really appreciate what you're doing. You're one of those advocates that we are just so grateful for. And we appreciate you.
Thank you again for stopping by the Bluegrass Podcast. Today's song was the Dead Horses song by the Local Honeys. We are very grateful we got the chance to play one of their songs on the show today. So go and see one of their shows, grab an album, or pull up YouTube, because you'll do it again, I promise. Don't forget to stop by One Love Hemp Dispensary either, not to mention our own country store, to grab a cool piece of Bluegrass Cannabis merch too. BluegrassCannabis.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media, leave a review, or share an episode. Every bit counts, and we appreciate every bit of your support for Bluegrass Cannabis. Thank you again for listening.